Andrew Hatfield, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a few weeks in the making, hasn't it? Thank you. Firstly, thank you for your flexibility. We were due to do this a couple of weeks ago, and I got hit down with the one of many daycare bugs that was rampantly making its way around our house. And then last week you were in Vegas, so I think that's a nice reflection of the different lives we're leading at the moment. But I know,
Yeah,
in all seriousness, I know that was a work trip, so I hope it went well.
it did. It was long. I've never been to Vegas before, so it was eye-opening. It was more interesting and more to it than I thought. But yeah, it was successful.
Anyone who's just listening, you might think that Andrew sounds a little bit echoey. For anyone who's watching, you might think, "What a lovely backdrop," and there is a reason for that too. So I stumbled this idea upon Andrew with probably 24 hours to go before we were recording. That the whole focus of Take a Closer Look is that we really dig into the lives of our guests and really understand a bit more about them than you kind of get from their LinkedIn profile or kind of formal business meeting with them. And so I asked Andrew just to maybe do something or be somewhere that is a bit more reflective of him than just his office that we will see on your podcast recordings, Andrew, and your videos that you pop up on LinkedIn. So tell us maybe a little bit about where you are and why that's a nice place for you to be while you record this podcast.
Yeah, look, I love my office. It's a great space, but we built recently, and one of the things that I wanted, because we've got this amazing nature strip behind us, and will never get built out, which is awesome because there's a whole heap of waterways there. Is I wanted this balcony so that we can get some breeze because there's this great wind corridor. I can look over my grass. I'm over 40. I barbecue meat and I love grass. So it's an escape from golf and fishing. But I love this space, and like during the summer, I put the TV on inside, and when we're doing well, I listen to the cricket. Otherwise, I just enjoy the serenity.
Awesome. I love it. And it is really lovely. I think it's and I agree, you've got a beautiful office and I know that you've worked very hard to make it look as good as it does. But it is nice just to, as I say, the idea of this podcast is that we do understand people a little better. If you just get somebody at their desk and you don't see any other part of their lives, then we don't get a true kind of window to what you really like. So I really appreciate you moving all your technology and going through the pain of doing so to be able to do it from your balcony. So thank you. So let's dive into some questions. I'd love to hear just a bit more about your career um, and where you are now with that and kind of the journey that you've taken.
Yeah. So I grew up around my parents owned small businesses in technology. So that was a great introduction. I started with software development and moved my way through a bunch of different tech roles from like network and systems engineering to architecture. I moved into sales roles and then into product marketing. And now where I am, I'm running an agency that helps SaaS businesses in the B2B space overcome growth challenges. Um, I've worked in small business, enterprise, startups, publicly listed, public service, been a contractor or a freelancer, a full-time employee, obviously. And yeah, as I just mentioned now, I'm a business owner. So um, I sometimes feel like that imposter syndrome of, when you're telling people what you've done, it's like, well, you couldn't possibly have done all of that, especially with my young baby face. I'm only
Of
22.
course. Exactly.
Um, but yeah, like I've taken a different approach. I didn't really just stick to like one discipline. I like learning and achieving the thing I'm doing, and then like what can I do from there? And often it's been as I've been doing that role, like what has been that challenge that I've faced or the team that I've worked with the most, and it's been as you look back in detail quite logical. But if you just looked at it with cursory glance, you might think I had didn't know what I wanted to do. But yeah, I've always wanted to solve problems, and I've focused on being able to do that at different stages if the opportunities presented. So I kind of feel I've been lucky.
It's an amazing journey and there's a lot to unpack there and we'll come back to it. But I want to take a step back from your career now and just have a chat about who you are as a person, starting with thinking about how would your friends and family describe you? What would they say about you if we put them on the spot and said, tell us about Andrew?
Oh, wow. I did actually, poll a few friends, which might give you a hint that I'm detail oriented. um, the feedback and this was quite refreshing. That honest, loyal, principled, driven, definitely ambitious, working towards making things better when I leave it than I found it, and sometimes opinionated, which is a fine line to walk. Good opinion, bad opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the nucleus.
And do you think that's reflected in work life as well? Is it a similar thing? Would your colleagues say pull out the same sort of ways to describe you?
I think so. Like, I was just in Vegas for a client's conference with Google Cloud, and it was my birthday, and we had these song division. It was a husband and wife, singer, songwriter, guitar player couple, and they do these ad hoc songs for the people in the little mini theater every time we did a little presentation. And
That's right.
unbeknownst to me, two of my colleagues, grabbed them and they made a song, and it was effectively a love song about how much they love the work that I've been doing there. This was unexpected and really nice.
And really reflective of what they obviously knew you'd appreciate. And it sounds like you're fun and ambitious and always looking for new ways of doing things. Side of you is reflective in both inside and outside work, which must make my life a little bit easier because I do think there's occasions where people are kind of one version of themselves outside of work and one version of themselves inside. So I think the more you can blur those lines, the better, because it must be exhausting to have to to have to try and juggle between the two.
Yeah, I do try and be more measured, but the good thing is, like, the group of friends I've got is just really close. Like, known each other for a long time, and so we all know like the real us.
That's awesome. And as I say, we'll come on to talking about kind of the details of your career. But over the course of your career, who have you really been inspired by? And this question I always say is a little bit selfish because we're always looking for new people to bring onto the podcast. And if it's someone that you've been particularly inspired by, then it's probably someone we should be hitting up.
Like, obviously, my parents have been a big influence in my life and my wife. Like, we really complement each other. But from a professional development perspective, I had a mentor for a long time that really helped accelerate my career. Like, I was always good at the thing, but not always good at the soft stuff around it,
Mm.
and just some of that thinking. So, Luke Rollinson, completely different field. He was an Olympic stadium architect.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. Really random meeting. We met at a housewarming for a colleague when I was at Queensland Police Service, and just weird sort of conversations. We're like, hey, yeah, like, we really vibe and gel. And yeah, like, he had built a bunch of different businesses. He did a lot of the designs for like Beijing and things like that. So just a very different worldview.
You mentioned obviously at the beginning there that you have to work that full remit of roles. And you say, I think there's a bit of the imposter syndrome instantly creeping through there because you kind of say people might think that looks like I didn't know what I was doing, but actually, it was pretty measured and you actually just wanted to explore each of those different
Yeah.
areas. Now that you're a business leader and a business owner and you're advising customers on how to run their businesses, what have you brought from each of those different roles or the experiences of different parts of the business? What are you bringing to your clients today from that experience?
I think the source of this has come from my parents and the kind of values that I've got. But when I first started in tech, I was software for applications, and then I moved into infrastructure, and I just really quickly formed this view that everything that I do is to support the business, and for the business to be successful, it needs to serve its clients. And so I've just really taken that idea as being like fanatically customer focused, and like the way that we talk about it in our organization is being buyer led, because not everyone is yet a customer. Drawing that distinction, but that's the thing that really drives me is how can we solve our customers' problems, whether they're like paying customers externally or if it's like an internal like stakeholder of different teams that you collaborate with of providing different services. So that's really
Mm.
been the thing that has driven me to do well, to do a good job, to continue to develop my skills and experience and look at different areas is kind of like moving up that stack. Like started in like deep tech and now you're at that business level, but having that view across lots of different areas and that wide understanding of how the customers in the world of my customer, um, how they think, how they act, what their needs are, what their challenges are, how they operate, what their pressures are,
Mm.
that like deep understanding because I have been my customer's customer, I've been my customer, so I've always found that that sort of empathy helps.
It's exactly what I was going to say. You must have a certain level of empathy, and I'd imagine probably a lot of your clients are quite surprised by the fact that you have that. So you can kind of offer that different perspective, and you can offer the perspective from the person on, you know, to the left of them, to the right of them, above them, and below them. Like you can kind of do the full circle piece, and that must be really reassuring for them.
Some of the feedback that we've had is you're the first marketing agency that's actually understood our language. Like
Yeah.
when we talk about not just the business side or marketing or whether it's demand or product, like whatever the functional skill is, but how it relates to their application, their technology, and like the teams that they work with. Like
Mm.
it just naturally comes across because, like I said, we've done that.
That's so interesting. Do you think there's a that not that you want to necessarily call out the rest of the industry for doing it wrong, or maybe you do, but do you think there's a significant gap in marketing agencies that can do that? Do you think there's a need for marketing agencies to evolve to be able to do more of what you're doing?
Yes, I do. Like I've worked in startups and big enterprises, and we've had agencies come and work with us. And like again, functionally, they've been with it. They've been able to write really well, but
Mm.
they didn't get the domain, and so you spend all of this time trying to educate them, and the writing that comes back, or the asset, or the campaign, or the strategy, it's just it's not quite like right. There's that piece that's missing in terms of that understanding. So I do think that there's obviously the technical skill of whatever the thing is that you do with that experience.
Mm.
Like I remember when I was a contractor doing tech, and I specialized in Microsoft and Red Hat and VMware, and I'd just flip from project to project, and I knew the tech really well. I was doing a lot of work in, say, Queensland government and the mining and energy sector, but I didn't really know those domains. And then I remember when I started working for Red Hat and the project managers and the salespeople, they knew the customer. I'm like, wow, this is so different. I loved it, but it was just a completely different experience. And so, yeah, I do think that there are great agencies out there. There are people that are very good, and many of them, a lot of them are better than us. But we get our customer, and we get our customer's customer, and I think that makes a huge difference.
Interestingly, that you're talking about kind of how your agency, I guess, is set apart from others. Is that where um so the business is called Deep Star Strategic for anyone not aware. Is that where what it was born of? Was it that gap, or was there something else that caused you to take the leap into opening your own business? And on that point, I noticed that it was that you launched it in 2020, and I can't help but think that must have been a difficult time to be launching a business. So if it's not too triggering to talk about it, I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that experience as well.
Yeah, look, it started like many as kind of like a side hustle. I was working in some Silicon Valley startups from Brisbane. And because of that, I had some time in the Australian working day. And so I started doing some kind of like contracts on the side, and it just kept growing. So that was kind of that. Really, once it got to that stage of like, hey, should probably do this properly, thinking about, okay, so what is it that I want it to be? What is it that I'm going to do? What problem am I going to solve? And again, like coming from tech and working in startups in the Bay Area, there's just so many great ideas that fail. in many cases because of a lack of understanding of strategy or inability to execute. And
Mm.
so that's kind of been the driving force of, especially in the Australian sector. Like we do work with international companies in Europe and the US, but like we're Australian, that we don't really see that there's anyone else in the Australian market that has our breadth and depth and experience in this area. And
Yeah.
so how can we apply that and help? Because the US agencies, again, many of them are great. They have that same struggle of working with time zones back here, and often their rates just don't don't work for Australian companies. So yeah, really, how can we help great ideas succeed and stem that flow of 8 or 9 out of 10 startups fail to find product market fit? Like you start thinking about, how do I go from, say, Andrew Hatfield being a contractor to this being a business? And like in line with that and that, real customer focus, obviously strategy fit really well. And I wanted it to not be like a tactical, let's just go fill a gap. Let's actually make meaningful change. So hence strategic in the name. I've always loved the stars. Like when I was a school kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and science beat that out of me. But yeah, so really interested in science and kind of bringing that idea to what we do.
Yeah.
And I love the stars. And so Deep Star, there's a bit of a riff with some of the Linux heritage around Dark Star. I love sci-fi, Deep Star 6, and like all these different sort of influences and, the kind of thinking behind it. And if you look at our colors, they do match an unnamed dark hero, like sometimes an anti-hero of someone that does the right thing even when it's not easy, and that's really been part of the thing that drives us.
Oh, I love it. I love when there's actually a meaning behind a company name, and yeah, I mean, I had my suspicions that there would be. I don't think you could just pluck that sort of name out of the air. So I had a feeling there might be a bit more to that. So no, I love that story. That's awesome. And it might almost feel like you were destined, I guess, to own your own business, given that you come from the entrepreneurial background, as you said, with both of your parents owning their own businesses. Do you think that's fair to say? And do you think you learned a lot from them about what to do and what not to do when you kind of watch them doing that growing up?
Yeah, I think so. Like I did start a business when I was 20, 21, in tech, doing network security. I did okay, but I just didn't have the sales experience or like
Yeah.
business, like great tech, but didn't have the business side. And so I ended up selling that client base and going back to a safe and secure job. My dad was the salesperson and CEO and software developer, and my mum looked after a lot of the customers and the marketing side, and so got to see both sides of that.
Yeah.
The flip side is obviously the amount of time that small businesses take, and that is a real impact. So like building a business is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not something that you just decide one day. Oh yeah, like work's easy. I'm bored, lonely, looking for something to do. So why not? Let's start a business. Like it's tough. And as much as I talk about the imposter syndrome, I'm definitely confident, often overly, in backing myself and my ability to just get stuff done.
So we obviously chatted a couple of weeks ago before recording this today, and I think we probably could have chatted for ages around just the theme of get stuff done, because it really resonates with me as well. Like it's something that until recently I'd not really recognized was kind of a trait of mine, that like I'm really driven by just getting stuff done, but it's really kind of come to light. And yeah, I wanted to dig into that a little bit with you about how you sort of leverage that mindset of get stuff done, but also marry it with the kind of certain level of analytics that you need to have. And also, I'm kind of interested as well in how you manage that when you have other people working for you, because not everyone's going to have that mindset, and so you kind of I'd imagine need to kind of balance the different traits that people bring, Like, I'm really interested to know how you apply that get stuff done mindset, but balancing it along the way.
Look, I will start off acknowledging that I am constantly surprised that I deliver stuff. Like, it's what I do. So it's surprising that I'm surprised. But every time I get like a major body of work out, I'm like, I do stuff, which I find weird, but just it's kind of like you look back and go, yeah, I did that. Like, it was nothing. I had an idea,
Yeah.
whatever process we went through, and there it is. Like, I just, it's like when you launch a new campaign, right? And it works. It's like, I've done this a number of times and I'm still surprised.
Yeah.
It's that like, yay feeling. Um, yeah, like I'm an analytical, detailed person naturally, but as I've grown, I've learned and become not lackadaisical about things, but sometimes they don't always matter. And I am an over planner, and like I love lists and like task management, project management tools. And I'll go and write stuff out. And often, like, certainly when I was younger, that was the project. And I do remember one VP telling me, Andrew, the process is good, but it's the way to get the thing done. It's not the thing. And that really stood with me. And so simplifying my task lists while still having enough detail there that I can know what needs to be done. Others can see what needs to be done, where I'm up to, so we can collaborate without, having to have a meeting, things like that.
Yeah.
Like I always remember when you start your career and you're asked, like, how do you juggle competing priorities? And I was always befuddled by the question. It's like, what do you mean? You just do it. Like,
Yeah.
I had to contrive an answer that was kind of textbook because
Yeah.
just what I did.
What do they want me to say here?
Yeah, right. Like, it's similar sort of approach when we look at, okay, a client, they've got three potential things they can do. And we look, okay, well, what's the thing that's going to move the needle the most? And which is the one that's going to be the fastest? And like, you weigh those things up. And depending on the situation, one will win over the other. And really taking a, like that just get stuff done approach of, it doesn't need to be perfect. Like, perfection is the enemy of good. And that's something that I definitely learned along my career. You can always improve it, right? There's this joke that the second system a software engineer designs is the one that he never builds, because it applies all of the learnings that he got from the first one, and it's too hard. So trying to take this approach of, okay, break it up into milestones and chunks, and then, okay, what order they need to be in, what things have dependencies. I remember one role, I was on ground floor and we had these massive glass windows and they were covered in technical drawings. And my sales manager at the time was like, Andrew, like, you all right? Like, yeah, this is awesome. But I got stuff done. So.
And is it something that you work, so selfishly thinking about that kind of approach from my perspective at Squiz, we're talking a lot at the moment about how in a sort of bleak way of putting it, the future's dead, and how you can't take a sort of long-term planning approach to things now. You have to have these sort of incremental improvements that will move the needle, as you say, sort of continuously. So are you working with clients now in a similar sort of way to say, yes, you'll have that North Star metric that ultimately you want to get to, but how you get there, you can't map that out now. You'll need to sort of make these incremental improvements along the way. Is that something you're doing? And if so, how are you sort of tackling that? Is there a level of sort of supporting them in that mindset shift as well? Because I think it's, obviously so traditionally you'd think, well, in 5 years time, we want to have this, and this is what we're going to do this year, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's just not the way things really work now. Are you coming across that?
Yes, definitely. I've been talking with May, your CMO, that the rate of change in your space in digital is increasing, and we definitely see that everywhere. You just look at AI, right? Like, I hate to do this bandwagon, but the reality is in 12, 15, 18 months, it is not only, a year ago was it pretty amazing, the leaps forward we've had with generative AI in video and image and language processing has been incredible, right? It's kind of akin to what the transistor did. And
Mm.
so, yes, it is good to have a goal. And again, going back to some of the learnings from Luke, my mentor, that, goals in stone, plans in sand, that it's the where you're going or the outcome that you want that's important. How you get there is going to change, because there are things that you're going to learn along the way that are going to change what your plan is. There are things that are going to happen to you that you've got little to no control over. From a market perspective, like, it's so easy for a new competitor to come out of nowhere, whether it's an existing business doing something new or a whole new company. I can get talent from anywhere in the world. There's so many tools now to accelerate software development. There's all of these services that I can string together and fix it later. Cash is more expensive than it was, but still available. And the ways that buyers buy has radically changed, right? Like, they consistently rate the salesperson as the least trustworthy part of their journey. When they reach out to sales, they want pricing, and so there's just so much that's changed that you can't do things the way we did in 2018. You certainly can't do things the way we did in 2012 or 2010 or 1980 or 1950. Right? Like, things have changed, right? It's not just about technology and being digital first or sometimes digital only. You need to be agile enough that you know where you're going and you're committed to that goal and you commit to the strategy, but you're also flexible enough that you can change your opinion when new information arises.
Yeah, I think, absolutely spot on. And I just think if you actually take a moment to stop and kind of look back, or just to kind of put yourself in your own shoes in 2019, looking to the future and thinking, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next year. Like, it blows your mind to think about what has happened, obviously the pandemic, but like, as you say, AI in the last 18 months has completely transformed so many industries. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch over the next year or couple of years to see how we kind of rein it in, I guess, because I think there's definitely a risk that it gets away from us. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. But like you say, it's not just about AI. That next sort of huge market shift could be anything. We've got no idea what it's going to be, and so you just got to be able to pivot, for want of
Yes.
a better word. Everyone says pivot,
Yes.
it's the right one. um,
There's the big tech companies that have got a stranglehold on many things, and you sit there and think, well, how are you ever going to break that? And then AI comes along and just upends whole industries, not just segments and products. But what I do find most fascinating and terrifying is just how quickly people just innately trust the results from AI. I think that's something that we should focus on.
Definitely, yeah. I had a really interesting conversation with our CTO, Greg Sherwood, around that, about particularly from an engineering perspective, and the fact that there are AI tools that can help you to develop code, but if you don't already know how to develop the code in that programming language, you've got no idea whether or not it's right or wrong. And so, yeah, there's just a whole new world of risk and security risk from a data perspective. And he makes the point that previously we were worried about hackers coming in and stealing our data. Now we need to be worried about, are people just willingly sharing data with no real idea of the consequences from a security perspective. So yeah, as you say, a whole different world of things to be thinking about. Moving away from all of that sort of stuff, actually, I'm going to come back to you now. We're coming into the closing section. It's more about digging into the real you and kind of why you are who you are today. I think, it's been obvious today, but from kind of what I've seen from following your LinkedIn posts and listening to your podcast, you've definitely got a real knack for storytelling. I know I read an article that you wrote about how you need to find that sort of message market fit. But I think that all comes back to that sort of storytelling piece. And I wonder if there is something in that. Is there something from your background that you think you've brought with you that gives you that ability to really articulate stories in such an incredible way and help now your clients to do the same?
Yeah. I used to read a lot, and I often reflect on my, and this seems so oddly specific, my writing in year 5 and 6 was dreadful. And then I started reading like adult books, and my vocabulary just exploded. And I've been sold to a lot. I've done a lot of selling. I initially was terrible at it. I'm not a naturally good seller. In many things, I'm not naturally good. It's been a long process of very directed and specific and um, deliberate learning to improve and get better at many things. And like I just remember that when we think about, if we go back to like being customer focused, they do not care about my product. They don't care about me. Given a choice, they wouldn't buy my thing. And so if we understand that, I'm like, okay, instead of having it be about me, let's make it about them. All right, well, what's the best way to do that? And then you combine this idea that, like, how did we teach our history and our kids before we had writing, or when the world was smaller and you didn't go further than a day's ride? It was through stories, right? You look at a lot of like older religious texts, and a lot of the stories there are about how to keep your house clean, right? But
Mhm.
they're told in a story, not a list of instructions and step by step, do this, then do that. And so people relate to stories. They can see themselves in them. They remember them. It connects to emotion. Like I love listening to music, and that period that I started like really reading, I also listened to the radio while I was doing that. Come home from school and I just read until after I went to bed. Sorry, mum. It forms those memories that telling someone about a gigabit this, megaflop that, and a widget is round and mine's blue and yours is square, and like whatever, who cares? Like often, and again, this goes back to great ideas failing. It's often not the best product that succeeds. Like the best example, that we've had in our life is VHS versus Betamax. Betamax
Mhm.
was far superior as a product over VHS, but VHS, and I don't remember why, but they won. And I remember then many years later, we had the battle between Blu-ray and HD DVD, and Sony being Betamax and Sony being Blu-ray, they were not going to lose a game. And so I
Mhm.
do remember like the stories and the language that they were using. I'm like, hey, it kind of stood out. And so yeah, finding ways to put the buyer in the story, to make them the hero, to make your thing the tool that solves their problem so that they can slay the dragon. Right? Often you use the hero's journey, but not always. You often don't want the tragedy, but you can use that to your advantage as well. Like you never want to talk ill of your competition, but
Mhm.
again, you can use storytelling to share negatives that don't overtly come across as you being negative. They're more pointing things out as a difference. And so yeah, messaging is about changing minds. And the best way to do that is through stories, right? They're memorable, they create emotion, um, they're something that people can share, right? And
Mhm.
that's important.
I really like as well how you talk about brand. Um, Obviously, it's something I'm particularly passionate about, but I've seen you call out before about how brand is kind of one of the most misunderstood parts of marketing. And I do think, obviously, there's a natural tie between that sort of storytelling piece and the brand piece because um, there is that connection between um, not just what you do, but who you are and the story behind who you are. In a roundabout way, I'm getting to a question around who's Andrew. If I had to say to you, what's your brand? What's your personal brand beyond what you do, your career, business owner now? Who are you from a kind of professional perspective? What's your brand?
The fun guy in the pink jacket. Um, I've often seen my role as the fixer, whether it was in tech or sales or selling to a customer or in marketing. Like how can we solve a problem that is preventing you from achieving whatever your thing is at that point in time, and set you up for the next thing. Expanding on that, you know, who's Andrew? It's, we've kind of touched on a couple of those things, like the getting stuff done, like seeing it through and being laser focused, like sometimes to the point of not always in a good way. That like, this is the thing we need to do. Like I remember like a recommendation that I got one time from a peer that, Andrew gets things done through force of will. And at the time I was like, yeah, because we're just coming from a very difficult client when I was a tech contractor. And as I got older, I'm like, maybe that's not as good as I thought. And so something that sales and in particular product marketing has taught me is about being that connector and that collaborator. And obviously you're being in business, like you've got a network, and not like that sleazy, toss out your business card all the time, but like I have heaps of calls with people that are looking for a job or wanting to change careers, or they just want to chat about some thing that they're thinking about. And like that's not something that we ever duel for. Like that's just how can we be helpful? How can I be helpful? I encourage the team to do that as well. And so how can you add value? So I suppose leaving things better than you found it is part of that brand.
Nice. Well, you may be glad to hear. It's the last question.
Okay.
Always close on a question about, as I've mentioned a couple of times, Take a Closer Look is all about really understanding our guests, really digging into some of the pieces of your career, but also about you. And typically I'd say to my guests, what one piece of advice would you give to someone looking to take a similar career journey to you? I'd be surprised if someone took a similar career journey to you, because it's quite unique from my perspective. But having said that, I think what you've done is incredibly smart, and I think actually if people could do that, they really benefit from it. And if they had the passion that you've got to really understand each area of the business, it would be an incredible path to take. So if someone listening to this thought, actually that's why I'm struggling, because I don't actually want to be in this career forever, I would quite like to take a similar path to Andrew, what would you be your piece of advice for them?
Well, firstly, I think that's a good thing, because more and more people are having multiple like stages of career where they do very different things, and so you can't reskill from nothing. The person that is most valuable is the one that adds value, and so obviously being good at the thing that you do, like how can you be the best and like over deliver, like under promise, over deliver. But also understanding the impact of the things that you do and the other areas that you touch. So let's say if you're in tech and you're in infrastructure, like how does the application team work? Or if you're in, say, product marketing, how does the demand team work? Or if you're in sales, like how does customer success work? Like look at that from an internal perspective, but also look and see, okay, in whatever industry you're in, let's say you're in like a business style role of marketing or sales or consulting, probably you are focused on some form of industry or niche. I would be saying look for similar patterns in adjacent or complementary areas that you can apply those same lessons to. And conversely, if that is the case, there'll be things that you can learn from those areas that you can come back and apply where you are currently focused. So this just came to me from the what's the show with the American NFL coach that goes to the UK to coach an English soccer team. He's playing darts, and he's underestimated, and he talks about being curious. Ted Lasso, that's right.
I haven't actually watched that yet. I've had many recommendations, so I do need to.
It's very good. Bit of a tearjerker.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I think the lesson that he shares there is, be curious. Always try and learn something new and help others, right? Even if you don't get anything at all, whether it's, now, later, or ever. And like, that's really hard.
But I think it's incredible. And I think what you're saying as well is really interesting. Like, you don't have to necessarily follow. You don't need to go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, but there is definitely value in trying your hand at different things and then bringing that back to where you started, if that's what you want to do. So I think yeah, the advice to kind of say, just broaden your horizons, really. Make sure you're kind of keeping an eye open to other areas and understanding it, I think, is a really good one. I think it's going to be increasingly important for people to be able to have that sort of broader set of skills, and be able to apply them. So thank you so much.
That's right.
It's
Thank
been
you.
really cool to talk to you in such detail, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Not a problem. And like always happy to field questions. So if anyone wants to reach out, hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to have a chat.